Hi, I'm Josh, and welcome today to my Winter 2024 TBR. This is going to be a new thing I'm trying for this year where I'm basically just giving you a TBR for the next 3 months. I'm going to do the same with my wrap-ups. I want to try this new thing where I don't let TBRs and wrap-ups dominate my time and instead give myself some guidance but also a lot of freedom. So I'm going to be listing the 15 biggest books or series that I am looking to delve into over the next 3 months. The whole point of a 3 month period is to give myself some freedom for other things that may come up. These are 15 things that I am pretty certain I will get to or try really hard to do that. So first up is actually a series reread of The Wayward Children by Seanan McGuire. For those of you who are not familiar with the Wayward Children series, it is a Nebula and Hugo Award-winning series that follows Eleanor West's School for Wayward Children, a boarding school for kids from portal world fantasies who struggle to adjust to their ordinary lives once they come back to Earth. Without getting too deep into these books, because I have 15 I want to talk about, I'll just say this: I love this series, and I got granted the audio arc for the newest book in the series. I actually loved reading it, but I felt like there were some things I could have appreciated more if I had done a reread, and I actually figured this is a time to do a good reread, and it could also work for a book ranking of the series if and when I do that. So this is not just one book, even though it's one spot on this 15 list of books and series, but they're short, they're novellas, and they should be really quick. Another Country by James Baldwin is a reread. This is basically a premise of set 1950s Manhattan, Greenwich Village, Harlem, and France. The novel explores racial, sexual, and creative issues, addressing themes of bisexuality, interrace couples, and extramarital affairs. And I remember reading this a few years ago, and it was a tough thing to get into at first because you're split between so many different perspectives that don't seem to connect at all until they do. And when they do, it is such a rewarding payoff. And I'm reading this with the James Baldwin Readathon, which we should be reading it or reviewing it in January. I'm really looking forward to this one just because of how much I loved it. And I'm excited to have a reason to reread it and now discuss it with some great booktuber friends. Next up, I'm going to be reading Freedom is a Constant Struggle by Angela Davis. And I'm reading this one specifically because Jess Owens is doing her nonfiction book club, I guess, and I figured why not read this for that. A goal that I have for myself that should be in an upcoming video is to get back to reading an anti-racist book a month, and I felt this was a good way to start the year by motivating myself to participate in this book club. If you're not familiar with Angela Davis, she is an activist. This is a collection of essays, interviews, and speeches by Davis that reflects on connections between struggles against state violence, oppression throughout history and across the world, including topics of feminism, racism, and prison abolition. Now, transitioning to just Nick Kelly reads. The first one was a Nick Kelly read, but that's more for a project that I'm doing. This next one is kind of a project, although I haven't quite decided what I want to do with it. That is reading the Indian Lake trilogy by Stephen Graham Jones. I read the first one, My Heart's a Chainsaw. When it first came out, I think the first year, I had not gotten the second one, but I did get granted the third in the trilogy. The Indian Lake trilogy is set in a rapidly gentrifying rural town where our protagonist Jade relies on her encyclopedic knowledge of horror films to understand and confront recent events occurring around her. I love this because it motivates me to do that and then spend the time to talk about it, and it's probably a standalone review at the very least. That said, let's move on to the next Nick Kelly. It's going to be They Were Here Before Us by Elia Hafan, and this is an anthropologist's look at the first million years of human history. I saw this being advertised with Nick Kelly. I always try to keep my eye out for intriguing new science books or science history or even just history books. And this one really caught my eye. There was something about it that just seemed really intriguing. The premise here is a nonfiction investigation into our earliest ancestors focusing on the human migration from Africa to Europe. It presents both evidence of their lives, deaths, struggles, and beliefs, offering insights beyond archaeological sites. This one's pretty short, just over 200 pages. It's getting released in March, so I will probably end up reading it during that month. Hopefully I like it, and if I do, you can expect a review from me on that. After that, we have Becoming Ella Fitzgerald by Judith Tick, a biography about the singer Ella Fitzgerald, who was a major American artist and innovator of jazz music, rather. The book, however, is extremely long, 650 plus pages. I have the audio arc that granted to me, so there's a good chance I'll read this probably fairly soon. Honestly, I was compelled to read it this month, but I'm kind of behind on the books I had planned anyway, so I decided not to rush into it. I don't know much about Ella Fitzgerald. I just know I do love a good biography about major figures that I know little about, but know something about. So it's just that right position of someone who's intriguing. I love a good biography. So I have really high hopes for this, which could also set up for really big disappointment. Next up is one that has definitely been on my TBR, at least personally, if not advertised to y'all, and that is Never Whistle at Night, an Indigenous dark fiction anthology edited by Sean Hawk. It's an anthology of Indigenous horrors, and that's the best way to describe it. It's introduced by Stephen Graham Jones, who is himself Indigenous, and I am really excited to check it out. I just don't think I've been in the headspace for reading anthologies this month. Otherwise, I think I would have read it sooner. That's the main reason I haven't gotten to it. Acclimating to a new author is one thing. Acclimating to a bunch of new authors, jumping from style to style, story to story, is a whole different thing, which is why I can sometimes be a little hesitant to pick up anthologies. It's not just true for this one. There were others that are not on this TBR that I feel the same way. I should have mentioned Never Whistle at Night was released in September, so I'm behind on that. Becoming Ella Fitzgerald, I believe, was released in December. The Invisible Hotel, it is a literary horror novel set in Gothic tradition. The story revolves around a young woman who is trapped in her small Korean town and deals with the long afterlife of the Korean War. It is a speculative tale of crisis, stasis, and shifting identity. I did not know that. I knew this is horror. Maybe I thought it was speculative. Now I'm wondering if it's strictly non-supernatural horror. I don't really know what to expect here. I just know the title and the cover seemed really intriguing. I requested it. It comes out in March. Next up, another arc, Welcome to Forever by Nathan Tavares. This is a science fiction novel that explores our hopes, fears, and anxieties about the way we live and love. The story is set in a richly imagined future intertwining elements of romance and speculative fiction. It's also very queer. So let's see. We have queerness. We have a beautiful cover and a really intriguing title. All that came together to make me just really want to request this, and I did. It's by Titan Books, who has written or published other queer speculative stuff that I have really fallen in love with. So I am tentatively very excited. That feels kind of oxymoron there, but still, I'm really looking forward to that one. It comes out March 5th. Then moving beyond arcs for now, the one book that's not really related to anything else, and that is just, I guess you could call it a project, Edge Dancer by Brandon Sanderson, book 2.5, The Stormlight Archives. I read book 2 in December, and I flew through it, and I expect to catch up by late November, whatever it is, when the 5th book comes out. I don't think I will have time to read the third one in full in this first quarter of the year, but I think this novella, 200-something page book, should be hopefully manageable. I don't want to lose my excitement or all of the details that I've stuffed inside of my head that made it possible for me to get invested in the series, because I could so easily see myself forgetting everything if I sit too long on this series. It's a pretty stacked first quarter. Well, I'm kind of ambitious here, and part of that is actually because of this next set of books. I always get really excited about Blackathon. This might be my full TBR for Blackathon. I assume it's going on. It has been going on like the last 5 years. If not, I'm still going to be reading as if it is Blackathon. But the first one's going to be Chain Gang All-Stars by Nana Kwame Adjei-Brenyah. This is a dystopian version of the United States. Speculative, follows women gladiators fighting for freedom with a depraved private prison system. So it's similar to Hunger Games. It was released in May. This was a Goodreads finalist for Best Book of the Year, Best Science Fiction of the Year. But also, once I looked into it, I remembered, or rather realized, this author wrote one of my favorite books of, I think, 2020 or 2019. It was Friday Black. That was such a phenomenal short story collection. I gave it 5 stars. It was almost perfect. So needless to say, this being the second book I've read by this author, or will have read, I have really high expectations. I'm actually really excited for this one. Next up, let's do Leslie fucking Jones by Leslie Jones. This is obviously her memoir by the comedian. I've heard really good things from those who have read it. It was something that's intrigued me, and I thought this will be a good, fun, and hopefully not too difficult read in February, since I actually have a pretty wide selection of books I want to read. I want to make sure there's something in there that isn't too heavy, that isn't going to take too much energy out of me, whether it's intellectually or emotionally. With that said, let us continue. Next up is Womb City, a Afro-futurist horror novel that's a blend of Handmaid's Tale and Get Out. I requested this one quite a while back. It comes out in January. I want to get this read and reviewed, hopefully, if it's not a bad book. The premise is intriguing. I've also been sitting on it for too long, but I'm really excited to get into it because it sounds like it has the making of a really fascinating book, but potentially also a little intense. After that, I'm reading a book that I wanted to read, and for a short while thought I had read, The Invisible Man by Ralph Ellison. This is a fairly well-known book, a exploration of the African-American man's journey through the 20th century America, grappling with issues of race, identity, and individuality. I think for a long time I hadn't read this because I mistook it for a different book of a similar premise that I'd already read. The book is a decent length, at least 400 pages, I think, and it's obviously a heavy subject matter as well. Nevertheless, I'm honestly really excited about this one too. I know I said about all of these, but as nervous as I am about picking up a classic, I started listening to the audiobook, and it's just got a really good narrator. That's always a good sign for how receptive I'll be to a new book. As nervous as I am, I can't help but feel really excited by the prospects of, exploring the very dense themes that'll be in this book. That's the best way I can describe it. Finally, for my TBR for this quarter, it's going to be When Crack Was King by Donovan X. Ramsey. This is a book that re-examines the 1980s and 90s of the crack cocaine epidemic. So blending history and memoir with the author, and it follows the lives of several different people who were deeply affected by the epidemic, providing a human dimension to the narrative. This was one that I remember hearing, I think, in someone's wrap-ups of the year, some of the best books they read, if I remember correctly. I thought it might make a good pick for my Antiresis read for one of the months in this quarter. I will also give, an honorable mention to Tanner Reeve. I feel pretty certain I'll read one of her books, but I'm not ready to commit to which one. I just finished her series of The African Immortals. More on that when I get to my series wrap-ups for the year. But I'm not sure if I want to pick up one of her new works, because I'm getting down to fewer and fewer new works to read, honestly, or maybe do a reread of one of her old ones. I did love The Good House. It's been a while since I've read that. But I'll just say that as something that's on my mind that I'll probably pick up on a whim, but we'll see what happens. Those are all the books I plan on reading this winter 2024. I appreciate you sticking to the end. Let me know what your plans are. What are you planning on reading in this first quarter? But as always, hope you all have a great day and stay safe, and I'll see you all next time. Goodbye.